County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
I'm Susan Houston, a Master Gardener and a Master Composter. I volunteer at the Compost Outpost. Compost Outpost is a Tarrant County Master Gardener project at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. The ladies here are having a great time making their composting more interesting and fun by adding a centerpiece to their compost pile. Does the bin contain waste, or is it full of resources? The answer is it's not waste if it's recycled. Composting is an environmentally friendly practice that started back in the Dark Ages. This is a list of items that go to the landfill each year and a percentage of each item. About 18% of household organic waste could be handled through backyard composting. Grass clippings, brown leaves, green tree leaves, and small branches and food could all be composted. More unusual items such as hair and feathers provide substantial amounts of nutrients for the compost pile. Why should we compost? Compost is the least expensive soil additive for the garden. It can replace the need for fertilizer. Material needed for composting is free and readily available. Who doesn't like free? Composting lessens the need for new landfills, which most people would prefer not to have near them. Composting allows food to be produced in an environmentally sound manner. Lastly, soil productivity is enhanced by composting. This slide shows vegetables that were grown using composted soil. It produced outstanding results. Here's a close-up of those same huge vegetables. They were delicious. There are 5 rules of rot related to composting: mass, air, volume, moisture, and time. Mass is the amount of material needed to make a successful pile. The material for compost consists of browns, which are carbon, such as dry leaves, and greens, which provide nitrogen. An example of green material would be fresh grass clippings. A minimum of 1 cubic yard or a container that is at least 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot is needed to make a compost pile. Volume refers to how many cubic feet are necessary to reach the best composting temperatures. A 3 by 3 by 3 foot bin would equal 27 cubic feet or 1 cubic yard. Air or oxygen is the only ingredient that cannot be added to excess in a compost pile. Anaerobic means there is a lack of oxygen, which can cause rotted material and result in unpleasant odors. When you build a new pile, it should be at least 50% water. The compost material after that should be the consistency of a wrung-out sponge and be moist but not wet. You should decide how much time you want to spend composting when you choose the method of composting. You can either have an as-you-go pile or a batch pile. The ladies here just finished building a bin. They started with brown and they ended with brown. Notice the lasagna layers, you can see them very clearly. The final phase to composting is sifting. It is an optional step depending on the use of the compost. This is a custom sifter that fits over the wheelbarrow and prevents back strain. You can use 1/4 inch wire, or you could use 1/2 inch wire for your sifting wire. There are so many uses for compost. It can be used on lawns instead of a synthetic fertilizer, or it might be used as a top dressing for lawns. To top dress a lawn, add a 1/4 to 3/8 inch layer of compost. This is usually applied after aerating or when reseeding your lawn. Compost can be used as a 1 to 2 inch mulch on gardening beds and as a coarse mulch on trees and shrubs. You may wish to sift your compost that is mixed into the garden beds or that is used for potting soil. Sifting produces a compost free of twigs or any waste that might have been mixed into your leaf pile. Some benefits of composting are it provides a slow release nitrogen source. It's released slowly into the soil and provides a wide variety of essential plant nutrients. Compost balances the pH level of acid or even alkaline soil. It works like a sponge, helping to bind soil particles, holding air, moisture, and nutrients. These ladies are turning a bin. They lifted the bin off the existing pile and placed the empty bin in an adjacent space. The compost is hottest in the center of the pile, so the material in the center is placed on the edge of the empty bin, and the material around the edges is placed in the middle. This will even out the temperatures of the pile. A benefit of compost is that it helps to break up bound particles in clay soil and helps sandy soil retain water and nutrients while decreasing runoff. The addition of food to your compost promotes the altering of texture and structure of soils. Compost introduces and supports diverse life in soils, such as bacteria, beneficial insects, and earthworms. These microorganisms suppress disease and harmful pests. So let's talk about different types of decomposition in a compost pile. You have two different types. You have an add-as-you-go pile, which is cool and easy to do. It can take up to 1 year to provide finished compost because the pile is continually changing with new material that needs time to break down. Activators can help heat up the pile. They are usually meals such as blood meal, cottonseed meal, corn gluten meal, or alfalfa meal. Coffee grounds also serve as an activator containing 2% nitrogen and may be obtained free from some of your local coffee shops. When adding greens and browns to the as-you-go pile, try to alternate them when possible. Cover your food scraps with a brown layer or an activator such as coffee grounds. Coffee grounds can lessen the odors from the food scraps also. Turn the pile occasionally or bring the finished compost from the bottom to the top of the pile. This is for an as-you-go pile. A faster way to compost is to use the batch pile. It's considered to be hot and fast. The way you create this pile is to lay a coarse chopped layer of material on the bottom of the bin. You add a 6 to 8 inch layer of moist green. If you're using grass clippings, you won't need as much water. Each layer will need to be moistened, but you won't need as much for grass clippings because they're already 80% moisture. Then you add your brown layer, a 6 to 8 inch, same as the green layer, and you get that really wet. Food scraps, coffee grounds, and manure can be added to the green layer as desired. So you are putting down your green material, and then you're adding your food scraps on top of that. If you want to kill the smell, you add your coffee grounds to that. And or you may, on the next green layer, you might put manure instead, and then put your coffee grounds on top of the manure to kill the smell. So then you repeat this. This is considered to be the lasagna method, and you repeat it all the way to the top. The reason you do this is so that you will have your material in the right proportions, your greens to your browns. The batch pile will need to be turned every 7 to 10 days. You move your outer layer, as we saw in the slide with the ladies turning, to the center where the temperature is the hottest. You check it weekly, you take the temperature, you add water if it's needed to maintain the consistency of a wrung out sponge, and it should take 1 to 3 months to cure and be ready to use. Food scraps that you add need to be placed away from the outside edges of the bin to discourage drawing animals to the bin. A 5-gallon bucket of food, coffee grounds, or manure can be added to the green layers 3 to 4 times in that one pile. The time to complete a bin will depend on the number of turns and the amount of time between the turns. 4 turns is the ideal number for a batch pile. This is a picture of the compost outpost bin yard. There are about 25 bins here at different times. The piles here are all batch piles. They are layered like a lasagna. And there are a couple of geo bins in the center, the round vinyl ones, but we also layer those like lasagna too. The covers are for keeping the heat in the winter and blocking the sun in the summer. So these are all C.E. Shepherd's bins. This is another type of bin, a round metal tumbler that people might want to use if they don't have enough space for other types of bins. It comes to you in a flat sheet, and it has a lot of screws and things that need to be put together. So that's one type. This is the geo bin up close. It has the seam where the screws connect the pieces together, and I like using the geo bin because it holds in the moisture. It makes good compost. The other one, the green one, is on display at the outpost. It opens up at the top. It's rather hard to get down into. It reminds me of a spaceship, but that's another option. These are some examples of things that you can compost, such as food scraps, vegetable and fruit peelings, or the whole fruit, breads, all kinds of bread, grains, rice, cereals out of the pantry. You can compost things like that that are old. You can use tea grounds with their bags. People are always asking me if you can use the bags. We just throw it all in there. The coffee grounds and filters can be used. As far as leaves, you have, of course, the fresh green leaves, which provide nitrogen, and the dry brown leaves, which provide carbon to your pile. The grass clippings need to be composted in thin layers to prevent compaction. You make a sandwich out of them. You can put a thin layer of your grass down in your bin, and then add some vines. It has to be green vines or green plants that you have, green leaves, and then you can add another thin layer of your grass on top of that. Just make a sandwich out of it, and then it's separated so it doesn't compact. You can also use fresh weeds. Probably the younger the weed, the less seeds it will have, but the pile needs to heat above 140 degrees to kill those weed seeds. You may just want to avoid them if you think your pile is not going to heat up to that. Manure, we use horse, rabbit, donkey manure. We also use the rabbit and horse bedding. Try some different things and see what happens when you're composting. Especially new composters like to try everything they can. How about 6 containers of avocados? After the tedious job of removing the pits from the avocados in the first container, it was decided by the volunteers to compost the avocados with their pits included, and they both composted very well. This is a list of what not to use in a compost bin: meat or bones, fish, greasy food, no dairy products, no diseased or insect-infected leaves or plants, no contaminated material such as chemicals, poisonous leaves such as castor bean, oleander, poison oak, or ivy, Bermuda grass, ivy, and rhizome grasses. One example of that would be Johnson or crabgrass. No gone to seed weeds, dog, cat, or bird solid waste, no wood, barbecue, or coal ashes, no plywood sawdust or treated wood sawdust. Even if untreated, sawdust has a very high carbon to nitrogen ratio, 400 to 1. The carbon is 400, and it can cause a nitrogen deficiency. It's best used as a mulch on top of the soil. Sanding sawdust is too fine and becomes packed and anaerobic, and is also slow to break down. If you have issues with your compost pile and you need to know what to do, here are some tips for troubleshooting. If the bin is too wet, turn the pile and add carbon. If it's too dry, moisten it to the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. If it's moist but it's not decomposing, it may have too much carbon and not enough nitrogen. Turn the pile, adding nitrogen material or an activator. Here are more tips for troubleshooting your pile. If you have an ammonia smell coming from your pile, you may have too much nitrogen, or it could be alkaline. If the problem seems to be nitrogen, turn and add carbon. If it's alkaline, turn and add acid. Some examples of acid would be oak leaves, sawdust, or vegetable scraps. If you have a putrid smell coming from your compost pile, it may be too wet. Turn it to aerate it and add dry carbon, which is brown, to absorb the excess moisture. If you have pests that are bothering your pile, such as rats, raccoons, fruit flies, ants, first ensure that you have not placed any dairy in your pile, and you can use a rodent-proof bin to keep them out. If flies and gnats are the problem, cover the compost with carbon material, finished compost, or soil. We also have had good luck fighting ants with the spice cinnamon, and also coffee grounds discourage the ants. Here is a checklist of things to look for when you're trying to decide if your compost is ready to use. The material should be a medium loose structure with a crumbly texture. The crumblier the texture, the better. It should have a black-brown color and not be soggy or smelly. It should have an earthy smell. A bad smell indicates material is not fully decomposed. A neutral or slightly acid pH is best, although slightly alkaline is okay. Earthworms prefer a neutral to slightly acid environment. Good compost has a pH range of between 6.0 and 7.4. Improper moisture conditions or allowing the pile to dry out is the reason for most composting failures. The compost should never be allowed to dry out. It should be the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. When you squeeze it, you shouldn't get any moisture out of it. That would be too wet. Finished compost should look similar to this: a crumbly texture, black-brown color, and moist. So let's talk about carbon versus nitrogen. When you think about browns, think about leaves or hay or dry wood chips and even paper. Some of these have really high carbon to nitrogen ratios. So wood has a 700 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. It's better to chip or shred it and use it as a mulch for pathways instead of in the compost pile. Paper has a 170 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio and takes a long time to break down, even if it's shredded, and it provides no nutritional value. Hay and leaves have a smaller carbon to nitrogen ratio than these other two. The greens are just the opposite of the browns, having low carbon to nitrogen ratio. The grass clippings, fruit and vegetable scraps, the fresh manure, all are highly desirable things to compost with. If you have a lot of green material available, you don't need as many activators. In the winter, you're going to have to scrounge around for some green. You might want to grow some ryegrass or something like that if you're actively composting in the winter. And then in the summer, you don't have as many leaves, so you need to allow for that and maybe store them up. The ideal average ratio for your compost bin should be 30 to 1. This is not 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. This is a chemical composition. So we're looking at the carbon side, where we have leaves or carbon is 60 to 1, straw is 90 to 1, sawdust 400, and then even much higher is woody chips and twigs at 700 to 1. So on the green side, you have, well, let's take the humus at 10 to 1. That's 10 parts nitrogen to 1 part carbon. And then 15 to 1 for food scraps, 17% nitrogen for grass clippings. And then it goes up to 20 for weeds and rotten manure. And then a big jump, almost double, for fruit waste. Fruit waste are highly desirable to compost with because they will really heat that pile up. How do we calculate the chemical composition of the materials in our bin? So, for example, we would take brown leaves. We're going to use some browns, and then we're going to use food scraps, which are green, some green grass clippings, and we're going to look those up in a book to get the percentage composition of these various materials. And so you would add those three things up, divide that total figure by the 3 items, and then you would get 30 2/3 parts to 1 part. This is very close to the ideal ratio of 30 parts to 1 part. You should be very successful in composting these materials.
Hello, I'm Susan Houston here at the Compost Outpost at the Botanic Garden in Fort Worth. I am here with the shepherd's bin. We're going to build with the shepherd's bin today. We're going to build a pile. So one thing about the shepherd's bin is it provides the volume so that the temperature will heat up in the pile. It also has good circulation with the holes all around. It's lightweight and it collapses so that you can pick it up and move it. When you get ready to turn it, you're going to pick it up and put it in an adjacent space. So when you're siding your bin, you probably need to think about keeping it out of the sun, especially afternoon sun, and you want to keep it where the wind won't blow on it so much. Better in the shade than the sun. So you don't want it underneath a tree because the tree roots will come up under and suck the nutrients out of the bin. We're going to be doing the batch method today. This is a fast method that heats up to very high temperatures, and we want to mix these ingredients in the proper way so that this will heat up to thermophilic state for your microorganisms. They're going to get real busy and eat all this their way in this, and then it will heat up to like at least 140 to 160. So we've set up here, we've got all of our things ready to go. It's best to get all of your browns and then get your greens. And we have some food here, we have some coffee, and we have some rabbit manure here to use. Some of your food scraps will need to be chopped up. Like if you've got a big piece of fruit, like a whole pineapple, you might want to chop that up with a machete. The smaller the surface of the material, the better it is. It'll compost faster. So we're going to use this method that we've come up with from doing this over and over. We fill this with the water, this wheelbarrow, and then we add our leaves to it. We press them down into the barrel, get them wet, and now this is soaking wet. So we can put that in our pile. You need about 50% moisture when you're building a pile. So this is really a good idea. You don't have to layer your brown leaves and then stand here and water it. You're already wet. The proper proportions of your material, your greens to your browns, is very important. So you want to, what we're going to do today is layer this and layer it in almost equal piles of browns and greens all the way to the top. We always start with some kind of coarse material on the bottom. This provides aeration to your pile. And this is a root. We take the roots out. And then we start with brown. And then we do our green. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So when we get to the top, we are going to stop at the top with brown. We'll go all the way up to the top. The kind of material you have determines the outcome of the compost fermentation and the fertilizer value of the finished compost. So some examples of browns. Most varieties of your leaves can be used. You need to sift them, not sift them, you need to chop them, you need to shred them or bruise them so that they'll be smaller pieces. You can also put them on the ground and mow over them, mulch them so that they'll be chopped up. Out here we don't have a lot of time, so we don't do that with our leaves. But that's a really good way to do it, and it'll compost faster. So some of the greens would be like discarded plants out of the garden, vegetables, fruits. You have the coffee grounds. They're like 20% nitrogen. You can use your coffee filters. You can use tea grounds, tea bags. We've composted pumpkins, papayas, all kinds of large fruit. Just chop it up. We do not want to compost anything that promotes disease, causes odors, or attracts pests. So the things that we cannot compost are meat, fish, pet waste, any poultry, any grease or oil, any dairy products, no sawdust from treated wood, no weeds with seed heads, or no grease or oil. So we're going to start building our pile. We've got a layer here of coarse material. I have taken the shears and chopped it up like this, and then that's our bottom layer. That will provide good aeration. And then we're going to start with a small layer of brown over this. So you kind of make a fishing hole here to get the leaves out. So we've got water running out already. When you do your leaves this way, they hold a lot of water. So you just keep going. It takes about one wheelbarrow full of leaves to make a layer. This will be a short layer because it's already got brown on the bottom. And if you've got any sticks or anything like this, you can just either take them out now, or we always sift our piles and they'll come out then. So we've got some helpers now. This is Carolyn St. Clair, and over here we have Jenny Schmidt, and they're going to help with this building of this pile. So we're going to put our green layer down now. We're going to cover the brown layer. These clippings are out of the greenhouse. You should be able to look at your side to kind of see how tall it is. You want 6 to 8 inches of each layer. So now we're ready for our brown layer. So we've got our hose running in our wheelbarrow. Sorry, Carolyn. Very sorry. I think I woke you up. So we've got our water running on the side here constantly so that we can replenish our water. It's very helpful to have additional hands to do this. You can either use a tool to get these out, or you can just use your hands. So let's see what we've got here. And kind of level it out. If you don't have 6 to 8 inches, you can just do your next layer the same size. So we've got our brown, green, and brown. Maybe just a little bit more brown. You especially want your outside edges to be solid. And get those corners. So this is probably a good layer. So next we're going to put our green. So we'll get some more of these greenhouse clippings. Ooh, some pretty purple flowers. Look at that. And if anything needs to be chopped, you can chop it up. So we're moving along. We're pretty far up already. And we can chop this if it needs to be chopped. Like this. Just anything that you think might have trouble breaking down. And then, let's see. Look at this pretty plant. Need something in that corner over there. And so now we're going to add something different. Let's beef this green layer up with some rabbit manure. So stand back, it has a smell to it. So we just spread it around here. So if you need to break it up or move it around, you can use this little tool right here. Looks like we have a foreign object. Okay, so we're ready to cover this smelly manure up with some coffee grounds. So we just kind of do the same thing with this. And we'll break this up a little bit. When we get our coffee, we always get some filters. But I don't know where they are right now. So let's go ahead and put a little bit of food on this. We're just beefing it up so that it will decompose. Keep your food scraps in the center. Don't have them on the edge. Eggshells are very good. They contain calcium for the garden beds. They break down slowly, so you can break those up. So most vegetables and fruits go away very quickly. By the time you turn it the first time, they're usually gone, depending on what it is. So now we're going to do another brown layer on top of this. Oh my goodness, y'all have a lot of leaves in here. Usually one wheelbarrow of dry leaves will take care of one layer. So we are going to add another green layer. This will provide a lot of aeration for our pile. We usually use things like this when we add grass clippings to separate them out. These are pepper plants. And then this is comfrey. Comfrey adds a lot of value and nutrients to your compost pile. So we'll get a solid layer of this. And then we'll do a little chopping, mostly the stalks. It's always fun to try something new. Something you haven't composted before. So we want to get that corner. So what I have here is some food scraps. And we have some hair from the beauty shop. Hair is 14% nitrogen. If we could just get a lot of it, we would be well pleased. You just need to be sure and moisten it. So we don't have a lot, but we have some. This is our first hair. Animal hair is good. And then this is a watermelon from the vegetable garden that the animals got to. And so we're just going to compost this. It will actually be okay just like that. We wash our buckets out as we go so that we can get rid of the smells and just pour it back on the pile. So where's our machete? Where's our we have a pineapple. So we'll just chop that up. Don't you hate it when you buy a pineapple at the store and they're not any good? So that may have happened with this one. So then we'll just spread this out a little bit. And this will just disappear. Here's a hard squash. The animals also ate that too. So now we're good to go. We're ready for our brown. Well, let's put a little of our coffee. This is actually coffee filters. So we just spread these around. If you have the time, you can chop them up, cut them up, but we never have time to do that, and it works out just fine. So you can get your coffee grounds from one of the local coffee shops, and when they send it to you, they usually have these filters in there. We separate them out and use our coffee grounds without the filters for our turning. But for building, this is fine. So we have a lot of these. This will provide some nitrogen for those leaves. Thank you, Jenny. And we got a little rabbit manure left. I'll just get rid of that. So now we're ready for our brown. We can use, when we're doing our green, we add these additives to the green layer. And you should use about 3 buckets of rabbit manure, 5 gallons. And then you can use about 3 or 4 buckets of coffee. And then as many food scraps as you can get. So you would spread that coffee and the rabbit manure in 3 different layers. So it'll be all throughout the pile. See, this is some moss. We don't want to keep that. It won't break down. Here's some more. Or no, I think this is grass. It's nice when you have it in a bag, so you can just dump it out. This will need to be wetted down. My goodness, we're almost to the top. So when you get about here, the weight of the material starts to sink the pile, and so it starts to go down a little bit. You think you're almost done, and there it goes. So these are pretty lightweight. They'll pack down. And we'll put some more rabbit manure. Get a hold of it. It's heavy.
Can be
Need some.
any animal manure, like horse manure.
We use horse manure, rabbit manure, and we've used donkey manure. And I don't want to look. Okay. So we're going to wet this down. Remember, 50% water. This can be spread to the edges, unlike the food. So, you know when all your buckets are empty that you're done. Or when you reach the top. So I'm going to add some, the last food scraps we have. We can just rinse this bucket out and then pour it on the pile. I've got a little more manure in here. Don't want to waste a drop of it. So this is like manure tea. And then we'll spread this out. Here's another centerpiece. There's a potato. This one's raw. Coffee is a nitrogen, food is a nitrogen, green leaves are a nitrogen, and the manure is a nitrogen. So that's just one green layer. Here's a little egg. And there's a little coffee cup that got in there. At home, I take these and take the lids off. This one is actually full. And take a knife and go around it. And then you'll be surprised at how much coffee you'll get out of these. So we're going to cover all this green with brown. It's nice to have a variety of material. So if one thing doesn't have a lot of nutrients, then maybe the next thing will. So we need a healthy brown layer here. Kind of level it out. So here we are. We've got brown, green all the way up. We probably need a couple more layers to the top. The more material you put in here, the more compost you'll have. We want this to stay moist, so we're going to cover it with some black plastic and then put a bin cover on top of that. So just for demonstration purpose, I'll show you. This will be our bin cover. So we're going to cover it all up with plastic and then put this bin cover. And then we're done. We've built a pile. This is furnishes food for a lot of microorganisms. They'll just start chomping down on this, and this pile will be quartered down by tomorrow. Thank you for being with us to build our pile.
Hi, I'm Carolyn St. Clair and I work out here at the Compost Outpost. We have a very busy Friday. First thing we do with our bins is we take the temperature. We can't turn one if it's over 130. This one is 110, so we're okay. The next thing we do to turn it is to pull this bend off and get it out of our way. We turn bins 2 or 3 times during the process of making compost. There's a little snake. We very often see those. We do it in order to move the outside of this bin to the inside, the top to the bottom. It aerates everything and makes it start heating up again. As we're working, we will add coffee grounds and cottonseed meal, which also helps build up the nitrogen level in it so that it heats back up. Once they have it set up, we will start moving, and you will notice that we will go from the outside first, taking it and putting it to the inside over there. Girls, have at it. I'll see if I can catch a snake and show them.
We do have some ants in this pond.
We put cinnamon on our ant piles in our compost bed because it helps get rid of them. They obviously either don't like to eat it or don't like to smell it. We're going to add cinnamon to our piles so we can help get rid of our ants. Nobody out here likes to fool with fire ants, but somehow or other they love compost bins. Now let's add some coffee grounds and some cottonseed meal. We put 2 cups in of cottonseed meal each time we add it.
It's windy.
Yep. Let's put 1 cup and then we'll add the second one later. That did really well.
So do we want
We might add some water, just not much, but just a little. We don't want everything running out, but we want to moisten it. Good job. That should be plenty for the first run. Okay, y'all ready to start working again? And let's add some more. And I need to get out of their way. Everything from the inside of this old pile will go to the outside edge of the other one that we're building. That way we reverse it and they all get equal time to break down. The closer to the outside edge they are, the quicker it dries out. This one looks fairly dry. We take the outside of the pile, we put it to the inside of where we're moving. The inside of the old pile goes to the outside so that it can equally stay moist and stay dry. Each time we can see progress. There. We'll stop and we'll break it loose and break it up so that it loosens it up over on the new pile so it can continue to break down. Periodically we add water, as we're doing now, because this pile is a little bit on the dry side. You want to add some coffee now? Whew! That's the first lid I've ever seen come off. We'll add the coffee grounds and we will do just like we did when we built. We'll spread them out so they get evenly spread on our pile. It helps heat them back up. 4 cups of cottonseed meal to a bin, about 1/3 of the way, and then 2/3 of the way. We add a bucket of coffee grounds to it. We water it in between maybe every quarter and half and 3/4, and then at the top We don't want it drenched to where all the water's running out the bottom and making a river, but we want everything good and moist. There go the last of our coffee grounds. They've been added, and they'll get spread around so they're evenly spread all through the compost. And as you saw when we were turning this one, you didn't see any food scraps. They've already decomposed. They do it very quickly. You'll still see leaves, you'll still see twigs and things like that, but you won't see the food scraps and things. They're gone. When we are turning, we check with the thermometer first to see where our bin is. If it's over 130 degrees, we leave it alone. If it's under 130 degrees, then we can turn it. If it reaches over 160, then we will turn it to cool it down because it's actually too hot. But so far, I've been out here a few years now, I've never seen one get that hot. But should we have so much in it that it heats up that much, then we will do just the opposite. We will cool it down. It's too hot. When we're finished, we cover them back over with black plastic, and then we will cover it again with our bin cover so that it keeps critters out some and helps protect from whatever. Well, we do 2x4s. They're 42 inches long. At the ends, we split it half in two and take half of it off so that when they overlap, they will be even. And they're screwed in, so they become 42-inch square. Then we cover them with tarp fabric, and we put a board down them to hold them on. Yeah, I can. So that you've got a board all the way around holding it in place. These will last hopefully a long time. The sun deteriorates them, and so periodically they go in the back of my car and they go home and I recover them. Or in some cases, I build the thing from scratch. So we have bin covers for all of our bins. When they get down to the level of number 12, if you can see it, it's ready to sift. It's low enough, we're going to check it. If it's ready, then we're going to sift it. Compost does not have to be sifted. It's ready when you break it apart and it feels like good, healthy soil, because that's what it will feel like when it's completed. We sift it here because it's put on top of the gardens over in the backyard vegetable garden, and it looks nicer. So that's why here at the Compost Outpost we sift ours. What I have at home I don't sift. I will put it on, I work mine into the soil a little bit on the top to give it nourishment. But you don't have to. You can just put it on, lay it on top of your soil and let the rain drench in and add the nutrients to your soil. But here at the compost, every bin we have, we sift so that it appears nicer when people are walking through. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something out of our process, and I hope you'll do a compost at your own house. You can't do anything better for your yard than have a good compost to add to it.